The game just ended when I got it wrong. Now come on. I like to think I'm a reasonable boy. So when I say this is majorly unfair because this symbol looks like it's telling me to smack the buttons as fast as possible, yet the game punishes you for doing that, would you agree that isn't my fault? You can shut up, Honky the Tonk Eagle! I mean, I cannot be happy with myself if I let Thomas on PS1 beat me, so I'm gonna try again, and this time I figured out what you're supposed to do. Instead of following the on-screen prompt that babies are definitely going to look at, just ignore that and hit the button once to start filling Thomas's tank, and then a second time to stop when it reaches the red mark. I do wish that was a little more clear, and by the way, if you don't press the button a second time, Thomas wets himself from his face. Ugh, back to the menu again, and now we have to move on to the cheeky little Bill and Ben flower pot train. What on earth could they possibly have in store? Oh, it's a
counting game. Well, I'm pretty pro at them by this point. 1, 2, 3, 4. Yes, suck on that with your working mouths. Another James minigame is next on the agenda, and you have to pick the correct animals and objects hiding in the trucks he's carrying. Easy enough. And then we get another Sir Topham Hatt minigame. Yeah! Well, more accurately, it isn't a game. We in fact get to create our very own train. We get to pick a body, some paint, a face, and even a funnel. Not gonna lie, this is really cool, especially if you were a major Thomas fan back in the day. I made a train called Gerard Way, and he's an angsty young engine full of hatred that nobody understands. And I think his funnel is overcompensating for something. Also, he sounds like this. Or you could always make the ugliest thing imaginable, like this lovely chap. Off to yet another minigame that this time is actually a minigame. So what do we do here? We need to wait for the crane to match with the correct object over the truck and then hit the circle button to drop it in. Pretty difficult stuff. I mean, what else can I say about it other than I get shown yet another image of inhumane train brutality when I'm done? By the way, the game is still going. I'm actually kind of amazed. I mean, out of all the other toddler games I've played in the past, I wasn't expecting any more than 15 minutes plus of total game time from this, but to my surprise, it just keeps on going. It's got too much love to get. I can't take the love that Thomas the Tanking is danking in me. We've got yet another page of minigames to do, this time in the quarry. We've got a jigsaw completion game, a match the image against the dirty train game, a memory game when you need to pick the correct train that will reach the station that you saw earlier, Fast and Furious 6, and this game where we control Percy getting chased by falling boulders. Are you thinking what I'm thinking? Hell yeah, I'm not gonna touch any buttons, I wanna see what happens. Wait for it, wait for it, wait for it. Boom! Slam dunk! Oh yes, Percy is down and then, ugh! No, oh my god, this horrific boulder from one of the scariest episodes of Thomas and Friends appears out of bloody nowhere and traps us on the tracks forever while staring into our very being. Oh what? You don't know that episode? The one where Rusty is convinced there's a boulder that's deliberately trying to smash him and all of his friends because they're drilling into a mountain it's sat on top of, and the boulder somehow manages to get off the mountain, chase the trains around, roll uphill, get behind Rusty when it was rolling in front of him a second ago, and the episode ends with the Fat Controller suggesting there's a paranormal force living inside the boulder and the boulder has a face! And here's a picture of a dying traction engine!
There's 2, there's 4, there's 6, there 8...
Oh my god, I can't believe it. There's yet another page of minigames to go through. We start off with this one, with a game that requires basic understanding of Japanese that I clearly really don't have, so I got every single guess wrong, and yeah, alright, I think I'm done now. I'm sure you've all got the idea by this point. There is a lot to play with in this game, but as you've seen, a lot of it is exactly the same, or I just don't bloody understand any of it. As we go on, there's some more counting games, more memory games, more correct path games, more creative games like this colouring thing here. More mashing button games, more matching games, more correct timing games. What more can I say about each of these games as individual entities anyway? What do you want from me? They're made for babies, I can't add anything else. Besides, the animal noises distort the audio levels. Saying that though, consider me surprisingly impressed. Yeah. Consider me surprisingly impressed with this mother chugger. I mean, yeah, it's simplistic and way too easy for any kids over the age of 2, but when I think back to other games I've played in the past that are meant for kids, especially games that are made for a slightly older audience, like Tweenies Game Time,
This is better in pretty much every single way, and this was meant for an older audience.
The graphics and music are much better done and way more appealing. There's a crap ton more minigames to play with and things to see and discover. When replaying certain minigames, they actually change aspects of it so it isn't the same exact thing twice to keep it interesting for kids on replays. And even though it's all in Japanese, it's that accessible and understandable that even I could play it without any Japanese knowledge whatsoever. Helped along by the fact that you never use a D-pad, only the face buttons. And in fact, when this game first came out, it even came bundled with a specifically designed giant button pad so the extremely young children this was aimed at couldn't possibly get it wrong. And it was wipeable, in case Thomas made them sick. I mean, look, in the menus for this game, you even get tiny little character biographies. I can't fault this game for the target audience. It's adorable. Well, I mean, I assume they're character biographies. They could be eulogies for all I know.
The next question is, why was it Japanese exclusive? Because I really don't know. Oh, brother, is that the time? I'm eating. Percy!
Just look what you've done to our breakfast. Now I shall have to cook some more. She banged the door.
Did any of you stop and think for a second that Breath of the Wild may not have been a 10 out of 10? Unpopular opinions. I have them, you have them, we all have them. They're like bacteria. And just like bacteria, at some point you're going to spread them all over somebody else and make them sick and miserable.
Look, I'm really not trying to go out of my way to upset anyone. That's not why I make videos, but you have to admit, unpopular opinions online are basically the equivalent of pond scum. No one likes it, yet it all rises to the top and everybody sees it. For whatever reason, we all just love a good trash fire when people claim to be above the filth and know more than the majority, but that is not what I'm doing today. Look at me. I know dingle dangle. I just love sharing my subjective views on things and seeing how people react, so before I regret what I'm doing, sit back, get some tea, and join me in my dirty bathwater.
I can sell this!
As I give you even more of my unpopular gaming opinions.
First off, does anyone else here think that Pokemon Let's Go Pikachu and Eevee are the best versions of Pokemon Gen 1? Cause I do.
I remember when Pokemon first came out all those years ago, how all the children played, how they all laughed, how they all kicked each other to the floor when they lost, how they used scissors on the cards of other kids they didn't like. Look, I even have this card here that I stole over 17 years ago, and you can tell I stole it because the guy it belonged to used to hole punch his cards so they knew they were his. I don't even remember the guy's name, but I remember his cardboard. That's what Pokemon did to friendships back in the day. And so unsurprisingly, I was never allowed to play the Game Boy games when I was younger, but one of my cousins was, and so I sneakily borrowed Pokemon Yellow from him, played it on my GBA, and was hooked ever since. The problem with Pokemon Yellow, Blue, and Red, though, is that for the classics that they are, going back to them today is like reading really old issues of Time magazine. You probably shouldn't. It's as basic of an RPG as you can get, and that was fine for the time, but remaking the world of Gen 1 for the Switch took every correct avenue. It's the same story and same locations, but with a huge graphical overhaul, better sounding music, and yeah, the random wild Pokemon battles were gone, but pray tell, what the hell is wrong with that decision? Because now, not only can you physically see the Pokemon so you can control when you want to fight instead of being interrupted every 10 seconds, but it makes completing the Pokédex 100 times less of a ball ache since you know exactly what you should be looking for before wasting time in a battle screen for the millionth Zubat. Leave me alone, damn you! Don't make me get the blankie out! Oh, what? There's no battling wild Pokemon at all in this version? Again, who cares? The newer games are way better at battling than Gen 1 is nowadays, and so instead you get a really fun catching minigame that rewards more XP based on timing and positioning with throwing a Pokeball, with status effects you can control, all the spare Pokemon you catch then being traded for a load of stat boosting candies for your current Pokemon, and you still get the dozens upon dozens of trainer and gym leader battles anyway. If anything, this system staves off the repetition for a remake, and by halving the focus between battling and catching, they kept the original goal of Gen 1 Pokemon consistent despite the differences. It's welcoming to brand new players and smaller kids especially that are just getting into games, and is way more interesting than original Gen 1's version of simply giving you hundreds of battles repeated ad nauseum without everything else supplementing it like in the newer games. And let's not forget the epic Mega Evolutions which can save your life in more difficult battles, and hey, the ability to do all the situational moves in the overworld like water skimming, tree cutting, lighting up dark caves, and fast travel flying, all linked to your singular starter Pokemon, was a genius decision, saving up your space and not forcing you to carry around a Pokemon that you would only use for a singular purpose in the overworld.
That though, That was tame. You haven't caught my bacterial opinion disease yet, so let's crank it up a notch. Do any of you remember Dark Souls?
What if I told you that the gameplay in Dark Souls, more specifically the combat system, how you interact with the enemies, the bosses and the world around you, isn't actually that great? And I say this with all the love in my veins, which are basically withered. Dark Souls and Bloodborne are both in my top 5 video games ever made. But when I took a step back to think of why that is exactly, I realised it wasn't the combat system on its own. You want to know what you do mostly in Dark Souls? You get to an enemy or boss, equip a magic catalyst or melee weapon, dodge a series of attacks or use a shield on the rare occasion to block or parry, and then hit back once or twice when it's safe. I mean, yeah, if you want to be spindly specific, there's a little more than that, but as a whole, that's mostly what you as a player are doing to engage with the game mechanics. Like, if you compare this to Bayonetta or something with the insane amounts of combos, situational attacks, different kinds of enemy behavior that requires jumping or dodging at the very last second to slow down time, incredibly fast ranged attacks to tie into combos, finishing moves, all that stuff. Dark Souls and Bloodborne don't actually have much going on aside from strong and light attacks that string together over and over again, a universal dodge, and a shield that mostly doesn't even work with bosses. It's the atmosphere, the level design, the vast array of playstyles and character builds, the replayability, the visuals, the music, the epic encounters and tense, horrific standard exploration in pitch black, grimy corridors of unspeakable terror. All that stuff works in tangent with how hard the enemies hit you to almost give you the sensation of a survival horror game, helped along by the huge amount of weight and planning to your attacks and the limited risk and reward healing system. Dark Souls and Bloodborne are the prime examples of games that are way more than the sum of their parts. How you control your character is one thing, but it's how that is built around everything else around you that makes the game so brilliant. And that is also why games like Lords of the Fallen fall down. The Lords fell down. Lords of the Plagiarists!
I don't like the music in Metal Gear Rising.
And with that comment alone, I'm absolutely certain I've made some enemies, because almost every other person I've spoken to about the OST in Metal Gear Rising Revengeance have nothing but the highest praise for it, or are just okay with it being there. I've never had anyone agree with me when I say I find it irritating. I'm talking more about the vocal tracks, by the by, and it's so popular to the point where if you search Metal Gear Rising on YouTube, not only will Metal Gear Rising OST be the first search term, but even Metal Gear Rising Revengeance OST will be just below it. People love this soundtrack so much that they're willing to type in the entire shitting name of Metal Gear Rising Revengeance in order to be specific enough to find the soundtrack for Metal Gear Rising. I'm saying Metal Gear Rising a lot, aren't I? Maybe I should Metal Gear. Shut up! I enjoy the game fine enough as a game, but yeah, as far as the soundtrack goes, nope, I'm not a fan at all. I've tried listening to it in the context of the game and outside of the game, and I can't stand it each and every time. I also think the lyrics to some of the songs are totally bloody intelligible, but then again, that may be because I'm deaf as a door handle.
Hello!
The vocal sound is way too whiny for me and switches between phlegmy screeching and twangy singing a little too abruptly for my ear to get accustomed to it. And where I like the idea of mixing more metal sounds with techno beats and aggressive synths, what I don't like is how this soundtrack smashes them together like a car crash. It just sounds like a wall of noise with too much happening at once for me.
Unfortunately though, like your sense of humour, your taste in music is one of the most subjective things you could bring up in a video about opinions. I mean, one man's ear candy is another man's ear wet fart. But I reckon I can get the unpopular opinion bacteria spreading again with my next opinion that Zelda Hyrule Warriors is really boring. There's a disease.
Can we all agree on one thing for a second? That being that Hyrule Warriors is really stupid. Like, it's so stupid that if it were a person, it would think Cooking Mama was a video game about cooking your own mother. Good, glad we got that out of the way. In which case, with it being so stupid and looking like it completely goes all out with its stupidity, why did I find it painfully boring to play? It looked unbelievably cool when I saw trailers, but when I finally got around to it, I felt like I had no impact on anything around me. The enemies, no matter how big or aggressive, all felt like paper bags being blown around with my repetitive combos and special moves. I know this is basically Dynasty Warriors, so I guess that means I wouldn't enjoy that either, but all I found myself doing for hours and hours was running to the objective, clearing out waves and waves of sword fodder, getting to the main commander, doing the same thing, and then moving on until a boss. And this would be fine for me if there was any depth, but if there was supposed to be some here, I couldn't find it. It felt so damn mundane to me, so mindless, like I could play it with my eyes half closed. It didn't matter if I was switching between different characters either. They all feel different to play, sure, but it restricts them with a game that is still about doing the same thing over and over again. Where it's amazing fun and real engaging for like 10 minutes, where you see the special moves activate for the first time and laugh your gizzard off as you essentially fix all the problems of your entire army by coughing over your enemies. After doing it 20 more times over with not much else changing, I kinda just wanted to stop. What didn't help either was the original Wii U version running pretty badly when that came out, and then the supposed definitive edition on Switch not running that well either. I mean, it was an improvement, but...
While we're moaning at Nintendo though, let's pair them up with Sony for a second, because you know something? I reckon that Nintendo and Sony could benefit from copying Microsoft a little bit more.
Anyway, yeah, when I say that Nintendo and Sony can take a page or two from Microsoft's books, that sounds a little bit redundant. These three companies have rode off and on each other so much over the years, they're practically raw, but in today's market, something I didn't realize about Xbox is that despite their most recent console being a bit of a mess in my opinion, Microsoft more than any other company, even since the 360, have been pretty consistent with providing a decent level of backwards compatibility. Did you know you can play a surprising amount of classic Xbox titles dating back from as early as late 2001 on a 2017 Xbox One X? I didn't until I started researching it, because I didn't even realize you could play classic Xbox games on the 360. Yeah, I'm a little bit behind. But how cool! 3 generations worth of games being playable in one place. That is something that the PS4 and Switch wishes it could do. It's even backwards compatible with useless games nobody cares about. Wanna play, Indiana Jones and the Emperor's Tomb? Or Sphinx and the Cursed Mummy? Well, you can on the Xbox One. It was this news that actually inspired me to replace a load of my PS2 games with classic Xbox titles for the sake of recording some of them at the best possible quality, because aside from emulating on PC, which barely works a lot of the time, there's no real way to experience PS2 games in decent quality aside from the PS3 HD collections of a few set titles. The PS4 doesn't allow you that, aside from a few downloadable PS2 ports on the PS Store, and when the first builds of the PS3s went out that could play PS2 games, most of them blew up. You can't even play PS3 on PS4 unless via a PlayStation Now subscription. And as for the Switch, yeah, I know it's a portable cartridge system, but if Nintendo are able to port Wii U games onto it and charge you the exact same amount of money it would have been when it was brand new, and Doom 64 is coming out for it, along with the NES and SNES games on the online system, why not include more GameCube and Wii games on the store, or Nintendo 64 games? When it comes to the Wii as well, the gyro controls would be way better than the infrared sensor motion pointer anyway, and look, I'm not going to pretend I understand how consoles work or the system infrastructure, but you're telling me there's no way at all we can purchase PS1 games on the PS4 store and play them on it? This can't be run on this. Especially when PS1 games in particular are incredibly easy to emulate everywhere else.
I don't get it! And while I don't get it, I don't get it! I don't get it!
I don't know how many other ways I can say this without coming across as a floppy, but I'll try it once more. The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild is a great game, but I just do not think it's a 10 out of 10 by any stretch of the imagination. This is without a doubt one of the most engrossing open world games I've ever played, and that nails the idea of total freedom better than any game has before it. The combat is good fun, the way to approach enemy encounters and puzzles are practically endless with the ability to physically manipulate the world, the sheer volume of secrets and surprises is amazing, the bosses are great even when they're pretty easy, the visuals and the music are spectacular, the strategic tension behind figuring out a path for your next vertical climb is great, the puzzles and the shrines are good, this stuff is all absolutely excellent, but if you ask me, it's all bent and twisted around a really uninteresting story that's delved out with a badly voice-acted Zelda in totally ineffectual scenes.
Don't you see? There's nothing more I can do!
And once again, a totally mute and gormless Link, even though they build the story around him and how he's supposed to be a legendary hero.
Do you really remember me?
A lock-on camera that is very temperamental and doesn't let you switch targets without unlocking and relocking, which is useless in groups. A slow-mo spam attack system that activates whenever the hell it feels like, before, during, or even after an attack happens. Side quests that don't really go anywhere, don't reward you anything too spectacular, and don't even compensate you with XP, which ends up wasting your time. And most annoyingly, the weapon degradation. I'm fully aware there are supporters of this system all over the internet, and to be honest, I'm glad you like it. Good for you. Pat on your head with a loaf of bread. But after I've conquered a massive task or finished a very difficult battle, only to be rewarded an extremely powerful weapon that only lasts about 40 hits in total before breaking forever, I don't feel like I've progressed. Know why? Because I have no clue when or where I should use it without wasting it. There's weapon durability systems which are totally fine to include, but then there's weapons that feel like you're attacking with literal twigs for how fragile they are. This goes beyond finding more weapons and forcing you to experiment as well, since you don't find decent weapons often enough to justify experimenting with them. This kind of argument favors games like Uncharted a lot more, since you have very small inventory space, but are constantly finding replacement weapons on the fly in chaotic battles, and can even choose to keep them on you if you run out of ammo. I mean, there's crafting and food in Breath of the Wild, so why can't we just craft repair materials and rely on needing to find them to look after our favorite weapons that we earned ourselves, instead of just having them break after a few minutes when it took us a lot to get them in the first place? When I found a tricky treasure chest or beat a really difficult boss encounter, I didn't feel like, oh my god, I found a really powerful weapon I can use. I thought, oh great, another powerful weapon that I don't want to use because I don't want to break it. I mean, the Master Sword in the game is a weapon that you can keep on recharging, so why can't they just have that with every other weapon, or make the weapon pool smaller and have your favorite weapons be repairable so you feel like you can use it but you won't lose them forever?
And while I'm on one, you know what? I don't even like the European box art that much either. I mean, the US one, that's cool. That's stylish. This looks like you caught Link in the middle of him weeing off the edge of a cliff. And by the way, I don't think God of War's a 10 out of 10 either.
Man, oh man, you think my Breath of the Wild review like to dislike ratio was a little off? Take a look at this sunshine.
Yikes, that's a big uh-oh from me.
Where I still loved Breath of the Wild despite what I perceived to be flaws, God of War 2018 was a game that I enjoyed fine enough despite the flaws. Yeah, I just didn't click with this one as much as everyone else did. In terms of the characters and their relationships, I loved it, with this being my favourite incarnation of Kratos to this day. But with everything else, it felt like a step down from the previous classic hack and slash games. And hey, that's when the story wasn't being interrupted, like when your son is having an angry emotional outburst at you because you left him for hours and hours on his own, only for him to then start talking in tutorial speak less than 30 seconds later. Even if you take away the fact that compared to the original God of War from 2005, you interact or fight with nowhere near as many Norse gods and monsters over the Greek gods and monsters, and take away the fact that you fight the same goddamn troll over and over again with different colours as a poor excuse for a boss battle, when they could have used the endless sea of Norse creatures to fill those places in and kept them as regular enemies, and take away the fact that throughout the 30+ hour adventure you're being built up to how terrible and destructive Odin and Thor are for everything you're doing, and then after a disappointing series of bosses you're then left alone with a teaser for the fight you should have had before the game just stops, when you get a build-up and satisfyingly epic conclusion in the original PS2 game. Yeah, taking away all of that, it's just not as smooth to play as I think it could have been. It's fine, but if you ask me, it's got a lot of problems. I get it, they wanted to give you a more mature story right behind Kratos' head so you're able to feel all the emotional weight right in your face, but when you try and combine this level of free-form movement and 360-degree dodge rolling with enemies surrounding you with a fixed perspective third-person camera, it causes its own sea of issues, all done for the sake of it just being another third-person action game because that's what people do now. This radar isn't enough here. I want to see more of what's going on around me. I can't plan my next move, I can barely see anything massive all around me that the radar doesn't help me avoid until the last minute when it's already too late. I can't immediately turn around by moving the left stick in the direction I want to go and have to use a delayed quick turn instead. Why can't I be locked into a strafe only when I'm aiming with the axe? Why do I need a strafe when I'm just fighting regularly? Other games have done this just fine, and even God of War itself did it better. You can't even sprint without unlocking the camera and moving the camera in the direction you want to sprint. Which then means if you're locked onto a very fast boss and need to make sure you see everything they do, you can't actually sprint while locking onto them. Isn't that It's just so damn cramped for such a fast-paced and brutal game. Oh, well, except when you're stuck in the myriad of non-skippable walking scenes and climbing scenes that don't test you, don't add to the atmosphere, don't add to the characters, and then allow you to move again, but through train track level design that even when becoming a little bit more open, doesn't trust you to jump at your own accord. You know, like you used to be able to do. Which means that platforming is gone, jump dodging and jump combos are gone. Oh look, another stone monster boss. Oh look, a boss that's just a stronger version of every other basic enemy in that area. What?
Believe it or not though, I still liked the game more than I didn't. I just wanted to point out the things that I didn't understand about it for the sake of this video. If you want more of a detailed opinion on what I think about the game as a whole, then check my review up there for more details. Anyway, could this video about how much of a bastard I am with unpopular gaming opinions get any more inflammatory? Well, I don't know.
This one is short and to the point. I don't mind Splatoon, but I've tried multiple times to get into Splatoon 1 and 2, but just can't stand how slow your movement speed is. Yes, I know, the whole point is that you turn into a squid and use that mechanic to move around the map faster while refilling your ink, but you know what I like to do in a shooting game? Move and shoot simultaneously, and the fact that you're stuck at a snail's pace whenever you need to shoot makes this some of the most unsatisfying gunplay in a competitive shooter, if you ask me. And in single player, when you find yourself walking around large levels with the only way to progress being constantly spraying on the floor for a bit, moving in squid form, running out of spray on the floor and so spraying the floor again and going into squid form again, you start thinking a lot more about how the ink gets inside the kids' bodies and then into the guns to be vomited back onto the floor and then sucked up again and deposited all over another player again, and then, like, what does it smell like? Where does it come from? Where does it go? I was going somewhere with this.
Oh, what's that, Nintendo? You're gonna throw me into an online match with players that have dozens and dozens and dozens of hours more experience than me? Well, bust my beef!
So you've made it this far, well done you, but that also means... yeah. You've had the disease long enough for the rash to start. You might want to check your knees. Thanks for listening. Please share your garbage gaming opinions in the comments below, and if you do not mind, I have some cooking to get on with.
So before you start the cookie wookie of the pasta, or as you say in the Americas, pasta, before you cook the pasta, you have to make sure it's thoroughly washed.
Excuse me, sir, can I get you a drink?
Ah, garçon, perfect. Yeah, I was just wondering, could I get all the alcohol?
All of it?
All of the alcohol, yes.
Okay, great. And for food?
Well, to be honest, I'm feeling a lot like pork tonight, so what do you recommend?
Well, we've got bacon salad, we have meatballs.
You know what, I think I'll have the hot dog, and be quick about it, I want it here 5 minutes ago!
Well, actually, kitchen told me we've got no pork.
What? Oh man, I was really feeling like a bit of pork.
Yeah, sorry, but they did give me this. What?
Oh please God, no!
What's the problem?
Give that thing here, this can't be real. Pepper, when did you get a music career? I hold here, in my hand, the debut album from aspiring rapper Pepper Peminem, and I can't believe it exists. Like, I actually can't, because not only does this mean she has infected the only media source which was initially safe from her trotters, but it also means that this is proof Peppa Pig fever is not dying down anytime soon. It's hotter than ever. This is brand new, by the way. I just want that to sink in.
If you've never heard of my channel before, you're probably wondering why I despise a seemingly harmless kids show so much, and don't worry, I do have my reasons.
Bursting bubbles is quite hard work.
I did an entire video about it actually, so click up there to go and see it. But to put it simply, I think that even after so many years it's been on and after hundreds upon hundreds of stories, the show never evolved to teach kids any valuable morals and demonstrated the most irredeemable, disrespectful and bratish behaviour from its main stars, you know, who the target audience are potentially going to relate to and copy, without discipline ever coming into question. At least I can only say that based on what I have seen from the show.
I mean, God, even Pingu got reprimanded.
This therefore leads to the characters in the show never growing, improving or learning, which means the kids watching never grow, improve or learn. But taking all of the morality stuff aside, I hate how ugly the art style is. George Pig is one of the most violently annoying cartoon characters of all time, and every episode serves as empty noise ready to be filled by a narrator that just repeats everything the character's already said, or says exactly what everyone is already seeing.
Eat your ice lolly before it melts and falls on the ground.
George's dinosaur ice lolly has melted and fallen on the ground.
You'd think by now that after 420 episodes over the span of 15 years, a couple of movies, a handful of games, and a theme park, that maybe, just maybe, the creators of this godforsaken show would have run out of ideas and would start putting their energy into other projects. But no, they're gonna milk this boar for all she's worth, and we're now at the stage of a Peppa Pig album. Have you ever walked down Hollywood Boulevard and had a load of people shove their mixtapes in your face? Well, imagine for a second that this thing is chasing you with her mixtape. That's what this is.
And like a knife slicing my vital organs, I welcome it. So everybody sit back, relax, and allow me to get my wireless Bluetooth Cove Solitude headphones on as we take a look at Peppa Pig's album. Oh, no, sorry, my mistake. Peppa Pig, my first album. She's so conceited! Why is Peppa so up herself? Like, she expects that this is gonna do well already, and there's gonna be a second album, inevitably. And hell, what if it doesn't stop there? First we get Peppa Pig, my first cinema experience, then Peppa Pig, my first concert, and now this! What could be next? Peppa Pig, my first handgun? I've already got one of them!
Okay then, I'm ready for you to hit me with your best shot, my first album. And to start with, I'm at least glad I could listen to it entirely through my Apple Music subscription, meaning I didn't have to pay for it. But I'm not too sure about the album cover. I don't know if it's the upside down Apple AirPods here, or if it's simply missing something. I don't know. How about if we... Ah, there we go! The hashtag Pepper effect rages on with... Help me! Okay, so we begin at track 1. It's Peppa Pig.
No shit. Who else is it gonna be?
By the way, unfortunately due to copyright restrictions, I'll have to do a lot of describing on what the songs sound like and only pause to use extremely short clips as and when they're appropriate. Yes, I know that sucks, but trust me, I'm doing you a favour. Anyway, It's Peppa Pig is basically a more produced and extended version of the theme song, and it's not the worst thing I could have imagined actually. You've got a kids choir taking you through most of the song, which entices the little ones to learn the easy rhymes and sing along, but then all of a sudden it gets interrupted by Peppa herself.
I live in a yellow house on a hill.
And maybe it's because I'm a bit out of touch with the show, but that does not sound like Peppa to me. Unless Peppa is supposed to be 30, the voice is way too deep, I'm starting to feel uncomfortable, and then all of a sudden...
Oh, I'm a bit of an expert.
What? What the hell was that for, Daddy Pig? You're a bit of an expert at what?
There's then a part in the last 40 seconds of the song that I like to call the Muddy Puddle Breakdown, because it's just Peppa talking about how much she loves jumping in muddy puddles with horrible suction noises in the background. And I'm fine with this, I suppose, but it makes me very worried about what the hell track 10 could be about if we've already talked about jumping in muddy puddles. Anyway, the song ends with someone taking a big dump.
I am Peppa Pig.
And on to track 2, Bing Bong Zoo. This song is basically just a load of annoying nonsense. That didn't take long, did it? Think of it like an audiobook of Peppa and her friends describing a few animals at the zoo, asking you to copy her actions even though you can't see her, and then putting those parts in between a song that can only be done justice by doing a dramatic reading of it.
Bong bing boo. Bing bong bing. Bing bong. Bingly bungly boo. Bing bong bing. Bong bing boo. We're all going to the zoo. Ting ting. This is the zoo stop.
Oh, there's also some questionable sound effects in here too.
Did you hear that?
I'm starting to feel a bit sick. Peppa, have you had a bath? I think you've given me foot and mouth disease. The most annoying thing about this song to me, though, is that out of every animal they could have possibly picked to fit in the chorus with the correct syllable count, for example, what they do with their first chorus,
I'm a penguin at the zoo.
they instead go for this,
I'm a crocodile at the zoo.
then this,
I'm a butterfly
and then this.
We're all animals at the zoo.
The words don't fit with the rhythm, preschoolers can't move their tongues that quickly when they sing, and I feel like my entire body is shriveling. The next track is Let's Get Ready, which is very easy to explain. It's row, row, row your boat, but about getting ready for the day. You know, getting washed, brushing your teeth, getting dressed, and all being sung without rhyming.
Brush, brush, brush your teeth until they're sparkling white. Brush up and down and round until they're sparkling white. Wait, that's the line? That's what we're going with? It's the same word!
I mean, look, it isn't difficult. Just change the first line to brush, brush, brush your teeth. Make sure you do it right, and the problem is solved.
We can't go out yet, George.
Yeah, because we look like this!
Next track is Expert Daddy Pig, and I dread to think where it's going because it starts with an almost minor diminished sound suggesting he's an evil overlord waiting to eat his kids.
Oh, I know what I'm doing.
But it's actually all about how Daddy Pig thinks he's an expert at everything from reading maps to making pizzas, but actually can't do any of those things very well at all.
Silly Daddy.
Leading to the end of the first verse where Daddy Pig tries to hang a photo frame on the wall, and the whole house caves in, crushing Daddy Pig to death. The next track is Rainbow Rainbow.
It's got all our favourite colours in it.
Really? But rainbows don't have black. Pepper's a massive racist.
And this song is basically a more difficult version of the standard Rainbow song that every kid knows in order to learn the colours of it, so that's fun.
Red and orange and yellow and green and purple.
And maybe it's just me, but when kids' songs and nursery rhymes specifically don't rhyme and instead try to get away with using the same word or not rhyme at all, that really steams my ham because kids love rhymes. They're satisfying and close off phrases of music in a nice tight bow which is easy on the ears. It's good for creativity and your language development too. So when I hear lines like red is the colour of our car, it's the best, I then expect orange is the colour of mummy's favourite chest, which is disgusting. However, it's actually red is the colour of our car, it's the best, orange is the colour of mummy's favourite dress, which just doesn't sound right, it doesn't land as well. I mean, you could put anything at the end of the first line to make it rhyme.
But then again, what else would you put there? Red is the colour of our car. Oh, yes.
Do you know what colour that is, George? That's right.
What? Oink.
The next track is Super Potatoes theme, and if anything, I'm just lost by this point. It's a song about eating your fruit and vegetables and being healthy, which is all well and good, but first of all, we still haven't established if Mr. Potato is actually a sentient potato, meaning we should be eating him, and secondly, the song's lyrics are really not clear on this message at all. I mean, it lists the fruit and vegetables that kids would know and why you should eat them, which is fine, but the chorus repeats the adage,
Remember to eat your 5.
with no further explanation past that. Preschoolers are stupid, you gotta be more specific. What? Eat 5 fruit and veg a day? A week? In my whole life? At least I can be positive here though and say this is the best song on the album so far. Yeah, I'm not joking, it's got good rhyming, a nice rhythm, a nice upbeat tempo, and the chorus is surprisingly catchy, so well done, Pepper. Sheeran.
Did someone say my name?
Yes, very clearly. Can you not hear them? It's almost like potatoes don't have ears.
Okay, now at this point, I'm getting the warning bells out. You see these stars here? On Apple Music, these represent the most popular and most played tracks on an album. And the fact that the first half of this album has these stars and not the rest of it says to me that the parents who put this on for their kids realised they made a mistake and couldn't stomach it any further than track 6. Anyway, track 7 now, Pepper and Friends. A desperate song that illustrates that in order for you to ever have fun in your life, you need at least one friend to play with. This is simply untrue and dangerous for kids to think. And my childhood self sitting on his own playing Taz Wanted on the PS2 because he was bullied all the time has something to say about that. I need more friends. Next track, The Class of Madame Gazelle, a marching song that lists off every child in the school of the show. Which is great if you want to learn the names of every child in the school of the show. But more egregiously, it tries to tell you that school is fun. Now come on, Pippa Peg. My childhood self sitting on his own playing Woody Woodpecker on the PS2 because he was bullied all the time has something to say about that. I really need to shut up. Track 9, Festival Fun. It's she'll be coming around the mountain when she comes, but talking about how brilliant it is that Pepper and George are going outdoors. No, I'm not kidding. Read the lyrics. Pepper and George are pigs from a battery farm. Oh god, here we go. It's now time for jumping in muddy puddles.
I wonder what this one's about.
Yeah, this one is just boring. It's the most stock-sounding track on the album so far, and that's saying a hell of a lot, because most if not all of the songs on this album sound like a load of kids singing along to presets on a Yamaha keyboard.
DJ! DJ! DJ!
Yeah.
Dictionary.
Okay, that's a bit harsh. I mean, it sounds modern, it sounds cleanly produced, it's not like MIDI quality, but that doesn't excuse the fact it uses all the same instruments and effects that you'd hear on every single stock kids nursery rhyme video on YouTube, or even what you can buy from stock sites online. This is a stock nursery rhyme track that I downloaded for free nearly 10 years ago. And here's Pepper's album. Copyright, sorry.
If it weren't for the voice actors from the show giving little snippets of dialogue in between all the tracks, I wouldn't be able to distinguish any of this as a Peppa Pig album. It doesn't fit with anything. I mean, look, think of the original Peppa Pig theme for a second. You know, think of all the xylophones and the brassy instruments going up and down and plodding all around. Sounds very piggy, right? Well, there's nothing like that anywhere on this album. It's just the most stock, bland, inoffensive bran flake music I've ever heard in my life. It doesn't feel like it fits on a Peppa Pig album. What's the point of this being a Peppa Pig album? When did my life get to this point?
Do I dare bring up another thing released decades prior that tries to accomplish the same goal but does it a million times better? Sure, why not? The classic nursery rhymes collection from 1983 that I did a video on years ago does indeed have an album version of the movie. And here you get nursery rhymes performed with a variety of different singers and musicians, played in totally different genres that change in every track, and with the use of real instruments. In fact, let's just take a look at the composer's written preface to the album. It says here, and I quote, "The aim was to present the traditional nursery rhymes and songs in an entertaining and imaginative way, but true to their historic roots and without the cheap commercialization often present in children's music." I salute